Hey everybody, Derek here to bring another video for The Walking Dead Season 6. And what this video is going to be doing is analyzing whether Ron is plotting to kill Rick. I think that there are a lot of things that are going on with Ron right now at this point, and I really want to know, is he just, upset, grieving, and angry like he could be or should be as a result of his father dying? Or is he really plotting some kind of a plot, to hurt Rick? So I'm going to let you guys know what I think. If you are not caught up with Walking Dead, if you have not seen up to the 5th episode of Season 6, then you may not want to watch this video because otherwise you will be spoiled. Okay, so obviously, if we go back in the TV show back to season 5, we remember that Pete, had been abusing his wife and potentially his children at the same time. Very unfortunate, very upsetting to many individuals who would see or hear about this kind of behavior. But because of the fact that Pete was a doctor in the community, Deanna really, in a sense, overlooked it and hoped that it would, in a sense, cure itself. Well, when Rick finds out, he's just not willing to settle that. So he decides to basically interfere. Pete and Rick fight, and Pete is exiled into another house to get him away from his wife and sons. Well, Pete does not take this very well. He comes back during the meeting with Michonne's sword and ends up cutting Reg's throat during his, enraged state. As a result of that, Deanna gives Rick the okay, and Rick shoots Pete in the head, killing him. Obviously, this is something that's very, hard to accept for the Anderson family, but at the same time, maybe a little bit relieved. I can understand that this would definitely be something that, for some people would be very hard to accept. I'm not excusing Pete's behavior, ever. I do not think that it's appropriate in any circumstance to put your hands on somebody for any reason to hurt them. None. But, that does not necessarily always mean that people don't love you. And I think that that's a struggle that some people have with individuals who may, have alcohol problems, may have drug problems, may have anger issues. It's not necessarily an easy, line of, look, I don't love you at all. I hate you because you do this, this, and this. We more, I think, as humans, hate qualities about people rather than hate the person. I think that we're more thinking to ourselves, if we live in the circumstance, boy, I wish that Pete would just stop drinking and, control his anger issues rather than feel, I hate Dad. I hate Pete. I hope he dies. I don't think that they really had that kind of a thought process. And I think that's how most people tend to look at these situations. I may be wrong, and I don't want to stereotype or anything like that, but I think that really when it comes to the Andersons and when it comes to Ron, I think that we see something like that going on here, where even though Pete was abusive and even though he did cause Ron an injury that prevents him from raising his arm above his head, that Pete was still his father. And I'm sure that they had good times as well as these terrible times, but nonetheless, the fact that it was still his father is definitely something that weighs on him. And I think that it's hard for him to really decide, was Dad really an evil, bad man, or was he just, unfortunately in a terrible state at a terrible time? I mean, it's not a good time in a end of the world situation or apocalypse to be hitting people, doing drugs, abusing alcohol. It's not a good time. It's never a good time, but it's worse to do it then. So I think that Ron is really struggling to come to grips with who his father was. And what makes it worse is that the guy who killed him, Rick, is surrounded. He's basically in that situation, and now Rick has been put in a position where he's very involved with everything going on in the community. And I think that that's a lot harder to accept. It'd be more different maybe if it was maybe Rick would not be there anymore, that maybe if they would have exiled Rick, or Rick would have removed himself from the situation and backed off, maybe that would be a little bit easier. But I think that Ron is definitely upset by the fact that Rick is now this person who is, in a sense, in control of Alexandria. He has stepped up, he's become a leader, he's delegating tasks, he's telling people, what to do. And I think that bothers Ron a lot. This is the guy who killed his father. He would want to see justice, happen for that, despite what Pete did. And I think that, that is what's weighing hard on Ron right now. And then, of course, you have, Ron with Carl. I think that I really don't know after the events of now how he feels about Enid. Because when Carl came up and talked to Ron about going out for Enid, Ron basically had this, well, hey, I told her not to go over the wall. She went over. Bleh her. Sorry, but she's on her own. So whether he really, had this close connection with Enid, or whether he was just, using her for something, I'm not sure. But some of that might have been, because he saw Enid, growing closer to Carl, like when they went over the wall together, when Carl held Enid's hand in the season premiere, I think that maybe Ron just has this, I don't care attitude anymore when it comes to that. You see a lot of that with people. Sometimes for some individuals, when people cheat, that's it. Any feelings, any romantic, connection that was there is immediately extinguished. I've seen that before, where some people will just, hey, cheating's a deal breaker, end of discussion, you're out, that person's out. They never talk to them again, never have interaction with them, they move on. Other people, not so much that. It's a little more complicated. But I think that Ron kind of has that, that kind of a stance where, because he just saw Enid growing close to Carl, he just says, well, forget her, I don't care. And I think that maybe there is no more of a connection there. But I think that when it comes to, Ron, I think that he is planning something, or, he's really struggling right now with his inner, drive to want to hurt Rick. And I think a lot of that has to do, again, with Pete dying, well, of course, being killed by Rick, and now Rick being in control of the community. You saw in the season premiere, Ron was following Rick and Morgan out to the site where, Pete was going to be buried, because they don't bury killers in the community. And, part of me wonders, did Ron have some kind of a plan there? I don't think he did at the time, because, obviously Rick went out with Morgan, so I don't know if he would have necessarily hurt Rick if Morgan was there. But I think that right then and there, I think that part of it was, how dare you take my father out of here? My father is my father, and, I would want to, be able to see and visit his spot. So I think a lot of that, there is some anger there as well for them, taking his father's body out of the community. You also have Ron yelling at Jesse, over her seeming to be okay with what Rick did, and Rick, of course, moving in and kind of trying to, become friends, if you will, with Jesse. I think that Ron would rather see his mother, reaffirm what he believes, and I think that that is something that sometimes kids want to see from their parents. They want the parents to see and understand what they're trying to say here. Sometimes we go to our parents because we want reassurances. And I think that when Jesse, tries to rationalize with Ron, saying, well, Rick is not that bad of a guy, Rick is doing good things, that's like, whoa, Mom, Rick is dangerous. Like, what are you doing? Why are you even considering, keeping this guy around and getting friendly with him? I mean, I don't know if he was necessarily thinking romantic things were going on there, but I can understand his perspective. That he, in a sense, wants, I think he just wants more distance from Rick, but that's not going to happen, so I think it kind of enrages him. Now, in the beginning of the episode 5 now, Ron grabbed onto his knife, when Rick was talking. And I think that, I don't think that he was going to stab him. I don't think that Ron is necessarily that stupid, but I think that there just comes this idea of when Rick is inspiring people and when Rick is, in a sense, making himself look good, that's something that upsets Ron. Because again, I think he sees Rick as a villain in his eyes, somebody who killed his father, and that people should hate Rick for that. And I think that he is disappointed to see that people really don't see things that way. And I think that just any time Rick tries to make himself look better or, make himself be a leader, that's something that Ron doesn't really deal well with. And I think at this point, I really think that he may have moved past, any hope that Rick would be exiled or Rick would, not become involved with the community. And I think that he realizes that, Rick is moving up the ladder in a sense, and Ron wants to stop it. I think that, you actually saw in Talking Dead where Alexandra Breckenridge said that Ron seems to take after his father, and I think that it's very true. And you see Ron going up onto the guard tower to ask Rick, can you help me learn to shoot? And Rick decides to, give him the gun and help him. Because I think that in a sense, Rick, he still feels like, he owes a little bit of a duty to Ron, Sam, and Jesse for killing Pete. And I think that he wants to make sure that they're okay and that they can, protect and save themselves. And I think that he's really just hoping that, Ron, being as young as he is, because he's not an adult yet, he's probably the same age as Carl, that, that Ron can mature and understand exactly why Rick did what he did and come to accept it. I think that Rick is hoping that that can happen with Ron, but I think that Ron going up there and asking Rick to learn how to shoot and taking his gun, I think that a lot of that is for a plan. And I don't know if he necessarily knows when he's going to do something or not. Like with Ron, I don't know if he has like this exact idea. Yep, tomorrow at 8 a.m. when Rick stands up there and, does I don't think he would be that stupid. But, I think that in a sense what he's doing is he is preparing himself for that moment where if he thinks that he can take Rick out, or if he, wants to, maybe he hasn't decided yet what he wants to do, that he's prepared and that he will kill Rick. I think he wants revenge for, Rick killing Pete. And I also think that when he finds out, or if he finds out that Rick and Jesse kissed, because if you remember at the end of the episode, Rick kissed Jesse again. And that was, a very passionate exchange between the two of them. If Ron finds out that that happened, I can just see this moment now. There's a very good chance that maybe that Rick and Jesse may have relations with each other. That might escalate to more physical, intimate connection in the bedroom. And I can just see Rick and Jesse, coming downstairs the next morning, and Ron coming down and being like, what the heck? What's going on here? That maybe Rick might have his shirt off, maybe he isn't dressed, or just the fact that maybe he overhears them talking about something, things like that. I think Ron might find out what's going on here, and I think that that's only going to enrage him more. To see that his mother is now shacking up with the guy who killed his father reminds you a lot about Hamlet, with Hamlet and, Claudius the king moving in on, moving into his home and, becoming the king and getting with his, mother. you see a lot of that Hamlet complex going on here with Ron. I mean, not saying that Pete was this excellent, great king, but you see the point. The guy kills your father, and now he moves in and is with, your mother. Like, that's just weird. And that's definitely something that, Ron would have trouble with. And I think that if he finds out, and if there was more than just a kiss that happened, I think Ron's going to take a turn for the worse. And we may see an instance where Ron tries to kill Rick. What would happen if he did? I'm not sure. I think that would be a very hard thing to consider, because again, if he tries to do this, this may be the moment when Carl loses his eye. I think that Ron is going to be the cause of it. That I think that Ron is going to try to hurt Rick, but either Carl's going to be with him at the time or Carl's going to step in, and as a result, Ron's going to shoot Carl, and I think it's going to shoot his eye out. And if that happens, I don't know if Rick would kill Ron or if he would just have him restrained and figure out what to do later. I don't know. Anybody does anything to Carl, I think that that's really cause to do, cause Rick to do terrible things to you in general. So I don't know, but I think that that's possible, that that's going to play out, and Ron may or he may not. Only time will tell, but that's what I think is going to happen. And I think it's going to happen before the end of the first half of Season 6. So with that, I'm going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank all of you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. If you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much for watching.